control. Her gravity is all that I know. She's over me. She's over me. She comes me with her hypnotic dance. She holds me here with only a glance. She's over me. She's over me. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls of all ages, welcome to the Friday edition of the Paranormal Portal. I'm your host, Brent Thomas, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be here and to be doing the show for you, all of you out there, both in TFR, iHeart, TuneIn, and TalkStream Live, as well as our YouTube audience. It's a great night. This is a really, really cool night for me. Tonight's guest, ladies and gentlemen, is he's one of those guys that I couldn't believe we got him on our show. And that's not me putting our show down. That's just me telling you how incredible I think this guy is. Joining us tonight, of course, is Mr. Donald Schmitt, who is, if you're not familiar with him, then you definitely have to look into what this gentleman has accomplished in his life. He is a best-selling investigative author, lecturer, producer, and illustrator, co-author to Witness to Roswell, former special investigator for Dr. J. Allen Hynek, former co-director, J. Allen Hynek Center for UFO Studies, former director of special investigation for CUFOS, and a former Wisconsin State Director of MUFON. He's written a prolific number of books, all of which I think have been on the Amazon bestseller list. His current book, just out, is UFO Secrets Inside Wright-Patterson. And ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to tonight's guest, Mr. Donald Schmitt. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me back, Brent. We had a great time the last encounter, and so I look forward to this one as well.
As do I. Now, I got to say, the last time you were on, you really blew our doors off, and I mean that in a wonderful way. It was just
Thank you.
The detail of the information, the background, the granular nature in which you have investigated the Roswell incident. I guess first and foremost, I think your inquiry into that has been ongoing for a number of years. Is there any new developments in all of that?
Well, sadly, as the World War II generation is just about all gone, we are left now to track down the surviving families. And we're finding that for first-hand witnesses that we have missed, that now the families are corroborating, are acknowledging what their fathers, what their mothers, what their spouses said just prior to passing on.
Wow.
And it continues to be just unanimous that it was indeed a craft of unknown origin that crashed north of Roswell in 1947. There were bodies recovered of an earthly nature. There were attempts to reverse engineer the technology, as advanced as it was. And I sit here this evening and tell you that there were little, if any, breakthroughs on that advanced technology. And the linchpin still remains after 72 years. On Tuesday, July 8th of 1947, the United States Army Air Corps, a branch of the United States military, put out an official press release where they announced to the world they had captured a flying saucer. And the point being, they started it. They made such a pronouncement. And so all I tried to do, and at first, as I was a skeptic, I tried to disprove that. I tried to come up with an alternative, prosaic explanation that still would fit the MO of all the witnesses involved. And here we are now 72 years later. I can honestly tell you, Brent, I'm 99% convinced that it was that press release which was the correct announcement. I can't emphasize enough. They started it.
Yes.
And I'm going to finish it.
Yeah. Wow. It's got to be a mountain to climb, though, Donald. It's just got to be amazingly daunting to, be butting against an official narrative on a government level. I mean, that's a hell of a task.
Of course.
Yeah.
And especially in their case with unlimited funding, unlimited personnel, as we often were successful in tracking down firsthand witnesses, and I listened to some absolute worthless commodity who's been to New Mexico all of one time, and he solved the case overnight. Never spoke to a single eyewitness. And they're the same ones that, and as we have witnessed the whole impeachment inquiry these past 2 weeks.
Sure.
And they're, no matter what your party affiliation, no matter what your politics, the idea that here they were honing in and trying to build a case on second and third and fourth hand testimony, as though it was all relevant. But then when it comes to Roswell, they go, well, no. You don't have enough first-hand witnesses. In fact, we disqualify all your first-hand witnesses, and you only have second and third-hand witnesses. And it's like, sir, you don't come into my house and then rearrange my furniture.
Right.
Because you have absolutely no idea what you're talking about. And you're insulting your audience because you're deceiving them. You're putting out false information about something as monumental as the visitation and the crash of a craft manufactured off the planet. And you're denying all the witnesses you don't like. You're saying they're disqualified. They don't count because they're saying something that you would rather continue covering up, hiding from the public. I would question then, who are you working for? What useful idiot, winds you up and you occasionally come out from underneath your rock and you spew such nonsense.
Yeah.
And then we listen to the news over the last 2 weeks and we hear that, well, secondhand testimony is sufficient if it corroborates first. And third is also just as good if it corroborates first, and fourth as well. And these are all attorneys. So sorry, you're disqualifying yourself before you even get on the playing field. Because to do that, you have to dishonor all of our firsthand.
Yes.
And sorry, we have over 130 firsthand to the events that happened back in 1947, from 5-year-old children all the way up to 2-star generals. And they all behaved, they all reacted the same way, as though this was something extraordinary.
Wow. So now, additionally, you are still actively researching the area where all this took place. It's not just an academic search for you.
Of course. In fact, what I find interesting, we're planning on having another archaeological dig. And there are new owners of the respective ranch. And I don't know by whose, sense of values, the fact that there are landmarks out on that very ranch, things that are historical, that were connected, that were involved back at the time of the 1947 incident. And one was the one-room shack that the ranch foreman back at that time, Mac Brazel, W.W. Brazel, when he led the two intelligence officers from the Roswell Army Airfield, as instructed by the very base commander, Colonel William Blanchard. And Brazel would lead counterintelligence officer Captain Sheridan Cabot, as well as the lead intelligence officer of the 509th Bomb Group. This was the first atomic bomb squadron in the world. And by the time they arrived at the ranch, it was dusk, late Sunday evening, July 6th. So they spent the night in that one-room shack. Well, the new owners, after now 72 years, they have torn that down. It's gone. An historic landmark. And the well, pump site number 1, that is also mentioned throughout the press accounts that the rancher Brazel complained, he had to circle the livestock, the sheep specifically, 2 miles around this 1 mile long swath of debris. And that's also in the press accounts at that time. And we had numerous accounts of the military describing that because there was so much wreckage and they were out 24/7 for 3 straight days. And they were spooked by it. They were very nervous about handling this very exotic, very bizarre material.
Sure.
And whenever they had a chance, we heard that they were dumping it down that well shaft.
Oh, man.
700-foot deep well.
Wow.
So the moment we start actually talking to the technicians that could lower camera equipment with lighting that far down to investigate this, and we go out and we check the well to make sure that it was still safe to work around it. What did the new owners do in the meantime? They had a cement slab placed over it to encase the entire well shaft.
Oh, no.
So it's like you tore down the Hines house, you capped the well, and now the monument that we placed out there commemorating the event in 2003, overlooking the very site. They want us now to tear it up and move it. Get it off of our ranch. Well, it's not on your ranch. It's on BOM, Bureau of Land Management property. Well, we still want it off. And we're giving you so many days to have it. So it's like, either this is just all people who want nothing more to do with this case. They want no part of it. And it doesn't even matter that we kept our word all these years. We have not made it into a tourist attraction. We have not been leading people out there and showing them that this is what happened here and there. And for the main reason, it's still an active archaeological site. We don't want to risk contamination. We don't want to risk people potentially planting something out at the site. So we've always kept it totally secret. Well, that doesn't matter. In other words, they're now threatening that we may never be able to come onto the site again.
Oh, man.
So it's like, okay, I need to sit down with the new owners, but I can't help but wonder who put this bug in their ear.
Right.
Is this all somehow orchestrated? You tear down the main landmark. You cap the well that we were going to finally, investigate. And now you want to prevent us from having future archaeological work at the site. If this were in a movie plot, the audience would be going, this is too predictable.
Yeah.
It's like someone's trying to shut you guys down.
Mm-hmm.
And if we have a moment, when we had our first archaeological dig in September of 1989, and we were working to set up the site for future archaeological work.
Mm-hmm.
We had our permit all secured from the Bureau of Land Management. We honored their specific, very strict guidelines. We could not drive onto the site. We had to park our vehicles and then do everything on foot.
Mm-hmm.
We laid out a systematic grid. We mapped out the site. We mounted a theodolite, a survey meter. That's the only thing that still remained there at the highest point overlooking the debris field location. And we kept our word. The place looked like we were never even there by the time we left. In fact, the ranch foreman at that time, his name was Jeff Wells. And the co-owner of the ranch at that time was a Donald Mogul. Well, they came out that Sunday afternoon to see us off, say goodbye, and to make sure that we left the place untainted.
Sure.
That, in other words, because it's conservation property, that it would look and appear just as it was before we arrived.
Mm-hmm.
So we drive out, and about a half hour, we drive cross country, and then we drive a gravel road leading us to the first paved road, which is Highway 247, which would lead us up to Corona, about 15 miles from the original nearest town to the very ranch itself, Corona. And it was a Sunday afternoon. We were going to fill up with gas, our 4 vehicles, and then drive another couple hours up to Albuquerque, spend the night, and everyone fly, to, their homes, their final destinations the next morning out of Albuquerque. So we're in the lead vehicle, 3 other vehicles behind us. And we pull out on a 247, the paved road, heading into Corona. Mm-hmm. And there off to the side of the road is a Jeep. And a man standing there in fatigues, look like military fatigues.
Mm-hmm.
And he's talking on a radio, talking on a 2-way. And we think, well, that's kind of curious, but we haven't done anything wrong. So we just continued on. Another few miles, there's another vehicle, another Jeep, another man standing there in military fatigues, talking on a radio. And my scientific director, Dr. Mark Rodiger from the Center for UFO Studies, he just gives me a kind of a wearisome glance from the front seat. And I just smile at him again, like, okay, we haven't done anything wrong. Just keep going. Another few miles, the exact same scenario.
Wow.
And then he turns back and he says to me, Don, I think we're in trouble. And I said, well, let's not behave that way. Let's just keep going. So we pull in, and it was a Shell station at that time in Corona. We fill up, and we're just about ready to head out. And another Jeep comes roaring out of nowhere. And this time there are 2 men in fatigues, jump out, and they confront us. And the one asks, he says, we're not from around here. We're looking for some good areas to go hunting. Can you help us out? And I was the one who responded, sorry, same boat, talk to the attendant. And I got in the car and I said, let's just get out of here and hope we make it to Albuquerque. Mm-hmm. Strangest thing.
Yeah.
And we arrived in Albuquerque. We spent the night, a little nervous as to what still might happen until we got home. We all made it back to the Midwest, Chicago, the Milwaukee, even Michigan area, Aurora, Illinois. Our two archaeologists were from Aurora. And a week later, Jeff Wells, the foreman, calls up and he's laughing. And he says, Don, you're lucky we can vouch for you guys. You're lucky we were out there to see you guys leave. Because the BOM, two agents were just out here. And they're livid. They're mad as can be. Wow. But thank God we could cover for you. We told them it wasn't you. Because when they came out to follow up, to check on the site, someone, multiple vehicles, had torn up the entire site, spun donuts. They tore up all the topsoil, spun out rock and stone all over in every direction. And that was the only site they touched.
That was a setup then.
It was a setup. And it was those guys who were intentionally trying to get us in trouble, discredit us, and make sure we never would be allowed back on the site. Now, I'm sorry, again, we have too many witnesses.
Yeah.
Too many people who were out there, too many people, including the BLM agents who photographed and recorded the damage. It happened. And the thought that, well, they just happened to stumble on the very location, which is out in the middle of an 85,000 acre high desert ranch.
Jeez.
It's not like turn left at this cactus or, turn right at that rock.
Sure.
They would not have known at all where the actual site was unless they had it in the official military records as to where this all went down in 1947. And so it was a setup. They were trying to get us in major trouble with the Bureau of Land Management. They failed, and there are ranch hands and ranch foremen since that time who have caught the Air Force out there on numerous occasions since 1989. And then we throw into the mix that we have new owners that we're having to deal with, and they're trying to stop us wholesale. They're telling us you will never be allowed to come out here again. So welcome, as I keep saying, welcome to my world, because the monkey wrenches, the roadblocks get thrown in our faces all over a damn weather balloon.
Wow. Yeah, that's true, isn't it? Yeah, the official,
it is true.
The official version is a weather balloon. So
over a weather balloon.
They must be really concerned then that there's still items to be found there. They must be.
Or I believe because what we're planning on, the last time we were there, we focused on a depository site about 3/4 of a mile from the debris field. I had our geologist, Professor Frank Kimbler, make that determination. Where is everything depositing? The runoff from the rain erosion from the site. And we had an area with about 10 inches of sediment that we used metal detectors. We spent 2 days going through, and not so much as a nail or a piece of wire or sheet metal. So now we retrace, we move back again towards the actual location, ground zero. But the one thing we're planning on doing is to cover the area at a much greater extent with subterranean radar.
Oh, nice.
Last time we did that, it was rather limited because they charge so much per hour.
Right.
And there too, I'm sorry, most of the time this is privately funded. Most of the time, we put up much of the lodging, the meals, the transportation back and forth. We bring in volunteers. we typically will pay the archaeologists who are involved. On 2 occasions, we hired the contract archaeology department from the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque. And, their budgets can run into the tens of thousands of dollars.
Sure.
And it's one of the reasons since 1989, we've only been back 4 times since in an official capacity in a scientific search for any artifacts, any remnants. But we haven't given up. And I think it's because we refuse to throw in the towel.
Right.
That we just can't accept that any crash investigation, any retrieval operation would have been that extent, that perfect, that they would have secured every last shard, every last element. And here we are. I drew up a cartoon years ago for our website, and it's an official from the Pentagon clutching his chest like he's having a heart attack, and he's going, "What? They're back in New Mexico. Won't they ever quit?" And again, we haven't, we won't, and yet they're the ones, whether with willing accomplices or just people who side with them, continue to try to prevent and stop us, continuing what we believe is a nuts and bolts scientific investigation of the crash, including the eyewitnesses who were involved. And obviously we must be winning, because they're certainly treating as though we're going in the right direction.
Yeah, the more resistance you encounter, the more you know you're on the right path.
and say, if nothing was happening, say after the last 30 years, not a single suggestion of phone surveillance or witness meddling,
sure,
or threats to our witnesses, or wiretappings, and strange people coming into the museum down in Roswell, and the Air Force people who keep nosing around at the crash site itself. I obviously would wonder if I was going in the right direction. And they continue to demonstrate that. As I had a colonel at the Pentagon one time, he called me up, and I confirmed he was who he said he was. And he warned me, he said, "Don, the closer you get, they're going to make it into a living hell for you."
Wow. Well, we're at break.
They wouldn't have covered it up all these years if there wasn't something to cover up.
Amen. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go to break number 1. We will be right back after these messages with more of Mr. Don Raymond Schmitt here on the Paranormal Portal. Don't go away.
fear.
You're listening to Truth Frequency Radio.
We are TFR.
Welcome back, everybody, to the second half hour of our show tonight. It's obviously we're off to an amazing start, just a compelling narrative, and I have no doubt that this is going to be a long journey. But I hope there's a treasure at the end of it for us all. This is a really important event, ladies and gentlemen. Obviously, those of you that are familiar with the Roswell crash, it still remains at the forefront of our national consciousness regarding interactions and potential discovery regarding UFOs and extraterrestrials. So our guest tonight, of course, is Mr. Donald Raymond Schmitt, who's joining us and definitely filling in a lot of blanks about this whole journey. But welcome back to the show, Don. And I gotta say, it really, when you're describing that chain of events of driving along and seeing all these Jeeps, they weren't even being subtle about it. They weren't even trying to be subtle. They were in your face.
And the one thing I failed to mention, there was no hunting season at that time. We're talking the beginning of September. And for them to have, we're looking for some place to do some good hunting. Well, okay, sorry, that's not why you were there.
Wow.
They were there for the very evidence that they left behind. And that, again, was to damage, to violate, to vandalize the very location that we were permitted to conduct our first archaeological effort, and they were trying to disqualify us. Yeah. There is absolutely no reason to doubt it was anyone but those people, those men who were there.
Yeah. It's an absolute orgy of evidence they were trying to pile up. And it's disgusting, that they're willing to do that. I mean, there's just no integrity in it at all. It's just disgusting to me.
But it actually is, par for the course what they did to the very people involved back in 1947.
Yeah.
Extreme measures they went to. I mean, and we discussed it the last time I was on, I'm sure. The physical threats to especially the civilians who were involved. The military for having absolutely no authority over civilians unless martial law is declared. Now, can you imagine if they would have, placed as far as a martial law over the city of Roswell, over a weather balloon recovery?
Yeah. It would definitely undermine their narrative for sure.
Precisely. And so they had to resort to the next best attempt at containing all this, and that was physically threatening civilians, physically threatening children. Now, any of your listeners tonight, I'd like to believe that any one of you would draw the line at the point that they would threaten one of your family, that whoever the government official was, whoever would physically threaten to harm one of your family, one of your loved ones, that you wouldn't just bow down and go, okay, fine, if you want to tell me it's just a weather balloon, I accept that, just don't hurt anybody. Or does it enrage you? Does it infuriate you all the more that you want to get to the bottom of it, that you want to see what would rise to that level, that it would necessitate that extreme treatment of civilians that they are sworn to protect and defend.
Mm-hmm.
And when I talked about the rancher, Mac Brazel, I mean, just imagine, he reports the find. He reports a debris field of wreckage that no one is able to identify. Materials that defied conventional explanation. Paper-thin, metal-like material that even a bullet wouldn't penetrate. Weightless in your hands, 16-pound sledgehammer, wouldn't even scratch. I always, like when I lecture audiences, I always suggest next time you go to a hardware store, you go to a Home Depot, pick up a 16-pound sledgehammer. It would go through your car like tissue paper.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And this stuff, it wouldn't even scratch. And then the memory material, which is what we continue, to search for in our archaeological work. The same nearly indestructible material, but this you could crumble, you could crunch up into a ball, you could crease, you could fold, and every time you place it down, it would unravel. It would return back to its original shape and size right before your eyes without the slightest indication of damage. Perfect memory. It possessed perfect memory. And so Brazel, he goes in the Roswell and he reports this first to the sheriff. The sheriff can't recognize, he can't identify the material. His deputies have never seen anything like it before. They contact the Roswell Army Airfield. The head of intelligence, Major Marcel, he's never seen anything like it before. The head of counterintelligence, in the event it's something foreign, he has no idea. And then the very base commander, Colonel William Blanchard. And it's important enough that he sends his two lead intelligence officers out into the field to investigate this. Not a couple of enlisted men, a couple of grunts just to humor the rancher, just go check it out and, see what it is. No, it's important enough that he sends out two of his lead intelligence officers to check this out firsthand. And then the very next day, while they're at the site, gathering up as much of the material as they can to return with their bounty, and still leaving enough material that it would take another 50 to 60 troops 3 full days to gather up and recover, the military abducts Mac Brazel. They have to take him into custody. Again, they have no authority. They can't do that.
Right.
But they did. And they don't just hold him for some preliminary questioning. They kept him for 5 full days. They wouldn't even allow him due process to call his own wife, let her know he was safe, he was fine, where he was. His boss, as far as the Foster brothers, J.L. Foster, didn't even allow them, J.B. Foster, call his own boss, why he's not at work, why he's not doing his chores back at the ranch. And they kept him, and they kept him up all hours of the day and night. They withheld food and drink from him. They asked him the same questions over and over and over again.
My God.
And then he started talking about the indignity, what they did to him. He complained to his family and his neighbors afterwards. And that's about all he would admit, because he certainly was not allowed to talk about what he had found, what he had held in his hands, and then even the bodies that he had discovered a few miles away from the debris field. So what he did talk about, what he did describe, was they did a full Army physical on him, and they did a strip search and a full body cavity search.
Ugh.
So in other words, they're looking for pieces of a weather balloon, I guess. And the best thing the skeptics can do is, well, he was lying. He was lying. Well, we have witnesses that he was gone for 5 days, including other ranchers, including those who saw him in custody in Roswell, 6 of them firsthand, no less, and his own very son, Bill Jr., and as well as his wife, Shirley, who learned about their father's situation, their father-in-law situation, and immediately went from Albuquerque down to the ranch to take charge, to manage it while their father was still in custody. And then you have also the other son, Paul, who drove all the way over from Western Texas because he was concerned about the horses, the sheep, and the cattle in the open pasture, the open grazing land. They could fend for themselves. Mm-hmm. But the horses were penned up. They were corralled. They wouldn't be able to feed or water themselves. And if his dad is gone all this time, he was concerned about the horses. And Paul, his son, described to us on 2 attempts, 2 opportunities. He went onto the ranch trying to get to the horses. And the Army had commandeered the ranch house. Oh, now, mind you, this is 10 miles from the debris field. Well, they still set up their base of operation at their house, at their father's ranch. Now, just imagine, in someone's private home, the Army moves in and says, we're setting up shop. This is ours until we leave the scene of the situation. And they kicked him off of the ranch 2 times. They would not even allow him to feed and water the horses. So I'm only talking about a few people here.
Yeah.
And you see the scenario. You see what went down. And I haven't even talked about a flying saucer. I haven't even talked about little bodies, little men involved. I haven't really gotten into the exotic nature of the wreckage. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about just the behavior and what went down just concerning the people who were involved in reporting the crash, and then how they were repaid for doing nothing more than their civic duty, reporting this to the authorities. And then we haven't talked about what they did to the sheriff. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, we could go on and on and on.
Yeah.
As to, does this make sense at all for the recovery of a weather balloon or the same type of balloon, which then evolved into Project Mogul in 1994, when they came out with, when the Air Force had a Pentagon press conference, and then Colonel Richard Weaver announced, well, we lied about the balloon back in 1947, but we have a new theory. We theorized that what may indeed have crashed was a Mogul weather balloon device, a Russian spy balloon, same off-the-shelf materials that even a 5-year-old child would have recognized, would have been able to identify in a second. And yet the personnel who were in charge of the atomic bomb, no less, had never seen anything like it in their lives. Mm-hmm. Neoprene rubber, reflective foil, wooden sticks, string, and tape. And then Colonel Weaver announces, well, what really confused the men at Roswell 1947 was not the balloon, but the acoustic listening device, the microphone. That was the principal theory of Project Mogul, that when the Soviets would detonate their first atomic bomb with this high altitude stationary weather balloon, that it would be up there and with its specific ballast design and arrangement and its array of kites, that it would then pick up the shock wave in the upper atmosphere. Mm-hmm. Well, the project failed miserably. It didn't work. But to suggest in 1994 that what confused, the most elite unit within the United States military in 1947 was a microphone. That they saw that and they immediately went, oh my God, we're being invaded. Must be from outer space.
Yeah.
And then to this day, Brent, whether it still would be the skeptics or even the willing accomplices in the press. We continue to hear the constant, bromides about Mogul being responsible for the entire misidentification of Roswell. But the fact that there are absolutely no witnesses to that claim to this very day defeats that argument before it even, gets off the ground, so to speak. Excuse the pun.
Sure.
But they have absolutely zero witnesses. All they have is, we're the government. We're only here to help you, ladies and gentlemen. And case closed. Well, we hear that every day, don't we?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a
We're
common
only
thing.
the government. Trust us. Believe us.
Yeah, well, if only. I just wonder, what is the end game to the denial of it? Is it just to hoard the information of the craft? Do you think that if they did say, okay, guys, we're going to let it out, there was a crash, it was a UFO, we got that, but we just have to keep it. I mean, wouldn't it be okay just to say it was real and they have to, keep it secret while they study it?
Well, they could acknowledge that they are still studying. They're still attempting, making efforts to reverse engineer the technology. But here we are. Our cars and other devices are hardly made of memory material. We're still, albeit we're getting into electric propulsion, but we've had that now for many decades. It's just that now it's finally becoming more practical. But we're still driving gasoline and diesel engines. We're still flying jets, and we're still launching solid and liquid fuel rockets.
Yeah.
We really haven't advanced that much in our propulsion technology.
Right.
In the last 50, even 75 years.
Yes.
And as I emphasized it the last time we talked, Brent, I still maintain it's a cover-up of ignorance. I find it very arrogant on the part of, we human beings, that we think we can get into the pilot seat like Will Schmitt in Independence Day and just fly that alien spacecraft like it's one of our own.
Right.
Just you talk about the ultimate arrogance on our part.
Sure.
And I maintain it's still a cover-up of ignorance. We cannot bridge that technology. It's that advanced. How do we just automatically, step into that level of information, that level of achievement, accomplishment? No different than if we were to teleport a TV back to the Middle Ages.
Yeah.
They'd be able to figure it out. Well, we know that wouldn't be the case.
Sure.
And so I still maintain that we don't know from where, from who, and from why. So there is nothing to disclose. I mean, they can acknowledge we're not alone. We have the physical hardware. We have the physical proof. But who is going to make that announcement and get reelected? Who's going to make that announcement and still have the faith and the trust of the peoples of the world, knowing that there's something out there that is able to fly with total impunity within our airspace, our own respective air sovereignty, and there's nothing we can do about it.
Do you think then that in light of like the Tic Tac craft and the Navy disclosure, that moves us closer to possibly getting that kind of acknowledgement, though? Because I mean, it's out there now, and we know that there's even, I don't know if it's an official disclosure so much as it sounds like it was more accidental that it was released.
Yes and no, because someone still had to authorize these pilots and other Navy personnel actually speaking out. In the past, we never would have heard from any of these, military officers.
Right.
Roswell is a principal example. The witnesses who were the least willing to speak out were the officers, with their pensions, with their very careers at stake. JNAP 146, which is Joint Army Navy Air Force procedure, is still on the books. And it reads, any disclosure of classified UFO information outside of respective ranks is forfeiture of all pension and benefits, $10,000 fine, and or 10 years imprisonment.
Wow.
And so is it any wonder that no one has ever talked before?
Right.
So someone had to relax those restrictions. And the fact that it wasn't just a one-time, just slipping and saying the wrong thing to the wrong people. No, they have repeatedly stepped out and described what they witnessed, that these objects, that the object that they witnessed defied the laws of physics, that it was beyond our technology, well beyond their, that any human being inside that craft would have been smashed to bits.
Yeah.
Just the extreme rates of acceleration and the extreme levels of deacceleration. Nothing that we could sustain physically, humanly, as we know. And so I personally would like to believe the Air Force were to come out tomorrow and say, ladies and gentlemen, we know we've been deceiving the world. We've been lying for 72 years about this. But trust us now. We're going to tell you what's actually going on and why we had to lie to you all this time. Still wouldn't believe it. Because that's all they've done for 72 years. They keep having press conferences. They keep coming out with new stories, new explanations. They keep stalling for time. Well, the Navy has never done that. The Army has never done that. I'd like to believe, and I had one of the pilots who was involved, who still remains anonymous, and he told me that the Navy has been fed up with the Air Force for years, speaking out for them, representing them. And one has to understand that the different branches of the military, they compete with one another. The pilots in the Air Force compete with the pilots in the Navy. And I can tell you personally, the best pilots in the world are Navy, not the Air Force, they're Navy. And it's not because I have worked and I know a lot of these guys, it's that they have global surveillance, global coverage. The Air Force are restricted to sovereign airspace. That limits them. If you remember during the Reagan administration, and we had the raid on Tripoli in Libya, and France did not allow us to fly over mainland France for that attack. So they had to circle around and they had to refuel. It caused them to have to, at a greater risk to the mission. But nonetheless, it was a demonstration of how we have to get permission, the Air Force at least, to cover respective as far as airspace. Another example was during Desert Storm. And I'll never forget then the late General Norman Schwarzkopf. And he was complaining at one of the press conferences days after that first raid, that first attack on Baghdad. And that very first evening, the United States Air Force declared air supremacy over Iraq. And Schwarzkopf was complaining that the Army wasn't being informed by the Air Force if that was even true, not knowing if it was then safe for the Army to proceed deeper into Iraq. The Navy was not on the same page as the Air Force, not knowing what the Army, what the ground troops were doing, and if they were to continue launching their cruise missiles into Baghdad. So to me, it just clearly demonstrated that even with, in contemporary times, they're not working together. They're not on the same page. They're competing with one another still. Post-World War II. So this idea that, well, if the Air Force says there are no UFOs, then it's good enough for the Navy. Well, when the Air Force declassified their Project Blue Book files, the most famous of their 3 UFO investigations, in 1977. And we even have, the new popular TV series on the History Channel.
Sure.
Project Blue Book, which is about 90% fiction. Nonetheless, when Blue Book was declassified, there were a few of us that were asking the obvious question, where were all the Navy cases?
Yeah.
Where were all the Army cases? It's almost all Air Force.
Sure it is. You're right.
And certainly the Navy had their own studies, their own investigations. Likewise, the Army did. Back in 1947, Roswell was an Army incident. But it was no Air Force.
Yeah.
This was an Army incident. So here, the Air Force publicly represented an official investigation into the phenomenon when the Navy and the Army, the Marine Corps, even Air National Guard, they all chose to conduct their own in private, in secrecy.
Gotcha.
And so another reason I would love to believe that the Air Force, realizing that they want this to come out. The new order, who has seen that the old order has taken this with them in many respects. This is the first generation that is saying, we are going to slowly trickle out the information.
Gotcha. All right, hold that thought, Donald. We'll be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go to our next hour break, and we'll be right back with more of this amazing, amazing conversation. Don't go away.
Truth Frequency Radio.
Play their games. Everybody loves to place their bets. They don't understand the price I paid. They don't care to comprehend. Trace their lines upon my body, dripping scars across my heart. Raging anger pours inside me as their lies keep falling apart. Just make sure that you're well fed.
I can't see you, Mommy. Where are you? I've never sensed anything like it. Caroline is not like those she's with. They're attracted to the one thing about her that is different from themselves. Her life force. It is very strong. It gives off its own illumination. It is a light that implies life and memory of love and home and earthly pleasures. Something they desperately desire, but can't have anymore. Right now, she's the closest thing to that.
Poltergeists are usually associated with an individual. Hauntings seem to be connected with an area. A house, usually.
Poltergeist disturbances are of fairly short duration, perhaps a couple of months. Hauntings can go on for years.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the hour number 2 of the Paranormal Portal tonight. It's an excellent journey. I don't want this to end. I just don't ever want this show to end because it's just such an amazing discussion. Special thank you to Justin Longteen for that donation. That's really amazing, brother. Thank you so much. That really helps out a ton. It means the world to us here on the show. So, ladies and gentlemen, today we are joined by our special guest, Mr. Donald Raymond Schmitt, who is joining us. And if you have any questions, feel free to call in 720-923-0500. Again, 720-923-0500. And let me just say, this might be your one great opportunity to talk to one of the foremost experts of the Roswell incident. And I mean, he's been in the community for so many years and doing research all over the place. So this is just an amazing opportunity to talk to an amazing man. But welcome back, Don, and I really appreciate.
You're very kind, Brent. Thank you.
I know you've been all over the globe. You've been just going everywhere, and I know we kind of chopped you off at the break. Was there more that you wanted to finish before I jump into something else here?
I advise even my colleagues, we need to remain very cautious as to the nearing possibility of disclosure. But most of these people are younger, and they don't realize that we've been here before. Mm. And it was before I even became involved, and I know that with Dr. Hynek, there were numerous occasions where it appeared as though it was imminent, that he would even be informed by media in the Chicago market, WGN specifically, one of the superstations, that they had just been tipped off from a source in Washington that the president himself was going to make some announcement pertaining to the subject. Mm. And both times, they dangle the carrot and then they pull it away. Huh. And then after Hynek passed away, we had a similar experience where a number of us were informed to be prepared to travel to Washington, that we were not to discuss it between ourselves, but we were to make plans to travel separately through different means. Some fly, some train, others bus, some drive, and rendezvous in Washington, and there would be some form of press conference. Well, that too, as quickly as that sprang out of nothing, it evaporated into nothing. And so we failed to, we failed to study our history. And then as a result, we repeat the errors. And I'm no different than anyone else. I certainly have made my share of mistakes, and it's only because to be, even introduced as an expert on this subject, there's no such thing.
Sure.
How can you be an expert on the unknown? Then it's no longer unknown. I can be an expert on the history. I can be an expert on the cases that I feel are the best, on a global basis. But to suggest that I have any more answers than anyone else, I guess the difference is at least I'm still in the trenches. I'm still on the battlefield, so to speak. And whenever I have this opportunity, I guess I'm reporting from the front. Mm-hmm. I'm, able to describe firsthand what we have been investigating, what we have been working on. There's so many armchair investigators who they typically believe the last thing that they've read in social media, and they accept it as gospel.
Sure.
And that was the one thing that Dr. Hynek drilled into us, that when it's your own research, when it's your own investigation, no one can take it from you. It's yours. The only thing they can do is express opinions. And I'm not expressing an opinion. I'm not expressing a belief, because I went from a complete skeptic on this topic to where now I can say that, as I mentioned in the first hour, I'm 99% convinced. And that's a result of my efforts,
right?
What I have experienced, the people that I have had the good, opportunity of tracking down and interviewing, and my colleagues as well. And you just cannot speak to firsthand witnesses who describe handling, materials not manufactured on this earth. And you come away and you go, can't believe it, won't believe it, anything but extraterrestrial. Or you sit there in awe and you realize, my God, I'm one person removed from somebody who may indeed have actually handled pieces of a genuine craft from another planet.
Wow. That is so incredible. My next question will have to be, I know you've been an investigator for a long time, and of course this has been a real cornerstone for your career in chasing this narrative and trying to substantiate all of these possibilities in this stream. But you must have been all over investigating several other cases too, huh? Through the years.
Well, prior to even making the proposal to the Center for UFO Studies Board of Directors, which I served on for 10 years, I was working on missing time cases. I was working very closely with Bud Hopkins. I knew John Mack personally. I still to this day know Dr. David Jacobs very closely. And more specifically, I was working with Dr. Hynek on such cases. In fact, the late Stanley V. Mitchell, who was the president of the American Hypnosis Society, he was the hypnotist who developed battlefield hypnosis during the Korean War. Okay. Now just imagine you're doing surgeries, amputations in nothing more than a hypnotic trance. Stanley Mitchell developed that. He invented that. And then to see later where I was watching open heart surgeries on film, and the patient is speaking to the doctors wide awake as they're in nothing more than a hypnotic trance, not feeling a thing.
Wow.
And then working with law enforcement agencies, and witnesses to a crime would be unable to even give the color of the fleeing vehicle. And then under hypnosis with Stanley Mitchell, not only giving the make and the year, but also the license number, proving to me that what the eyes don't see, the brain does. The brain records, and that hypnosis is, under the right tutelage, the right hands, a most useful tool. And I can honestly say that with Dr. Hynek, for working with Stanley Mitchell, I was the only other investigator that he enlisted, that he referred to Stanley Mitchell. that I was the only other investigator working with Stanley Mitchell, the top, the very best in the entire profession. And it was because of Dr. Hynek. So I worked on a number of most profound missing time cases, broad daylight, multiple witnesses involved, able to corroborate the missing time, multiple, multi-generational experiences within a single family, that type of thing. But the one case that I wanted to go after as a skeptic was Roswell. So I shifted gears. I went from that, and here for the last 30 years, the primary focus has been Roswell, because to me and to many of my colleagues and to many people around the world, it's clearly the granddaddy of all UFO cases. Within just the last few years, I've lectured in South America, in China, in Japan, in Russia. I'm just back from 4 lectures in Australia. And they want to hear about Roswell. What I found, what I was most specifically interested in specifically Melbourne, Australia, was the Westall case that happened in 1966. Middle of the day, broad daylight. It came over a children's playground between a high school and a primary school, an elementary school. And it was clearly a two inverted, like a pie plate or a saucer with another saucer inverted over it. And it came along a grid of power lines before then hovering over an open area outside the playground. And then it moved away and it went over a hill towards a park area. Well, while that happened, hundreds of high school children started to crawl over the fences, and they were running towards the park, hoping to, see the object more closely, while all the young elementary children were screaming and yelling, racing back into school that, we were being attacked, we were being invaded, that type of thing.
Wow.
So to be there today, within the last 3 weeks, and to meet these people now, middle-aged adults, and talk to them, and go out to the park and see where the object touched down, and to listen to the account of where the one young girl who got there ahead of the others, all at once came screaming, racing away in the opposite direction. And how the next Monday, this was a Friday, and there was a holiday that weekend, and so she did not return to school the next Monday, nor the next Tuesday, nor the next week, nor the next month. And in fact, when school officials went to her home, there were new occupants of the residence and claimed they had never heard of her or her family ever before.
Oh my God.
So it was just like she was herself abducted. She was herself, taken away, and her family, as though they were put in protective custody, that type of thing.
Right.
And so the more I'm hearing about this, I'm going, my God, Australia has their own Roswell. And the most intriguing thing about this, Brent, was the fact that the press was totally shut down. They had a gag order placed on them. There are absolutely no press accounts of this at the time. Hundreds of witnesses, including faculty, the teachers, broad daylight, a craft, that came down within just hundreds of feet of them.
Wow.
And to have a complete news blackout over this situation. And then the most intriguing thing of all the witnesses and the ones that I spoke to personally, I asked, now who interrogated you? Who told you you could never talk about this again? Who threatened you over this as a young child, as a high school child, back when this happened? You'll never guess who they said controlled and ran the entire investigation. and shutdown of the incident.
Their Air Force?
American suits, Americans came in and took charge of the investigation and made sure that the case never saw the light of day.
Oh my God.
And so whenever we hear of foreign cases, my first question invariably is always, were there American suits present? Mm-hmm. And when I'm told yes, there were, then we know it's a good case.
Right.
And so then the next obvious question is, what placed America in the driver's seat? Was it the atomic bomb? Well, no, because Russia, had their own, atomic bomb 4 years later. Mm-hmm. And England, they have their own atomic bomb. And so does France. And so does India. And so does Israel. And so does Pakistan. And so does now China. So it obviously isn't the bomb. Well, was it Project Blue Book, which was nothing more than a PR front? Mm-hmm. It's so much so that even now when they dramatize it on television, they have to fictionalize it, even just to make it, dramatically, watchable.
Interesting, yeah.
Sustain a regular audience. So what's the one thing? Was it landing on the moon? Well, as grand and wonderful an accomplishment that was, that's out there. That's the moon. That has nothing to do with UFO sightings here on planet Earth. If I were to proffer, a suggestion, and I would challenge anyone to come up with another reason, another solution as to what is the one incident that placed America in charge of UFO investigations around the world, including even Russia.
Wow.
I would suggest Roswell. Mm. It's the biggest bargaining chip that any country could have. You play ball with us. We're reverse engineering the technology. We're working on the technology. Sure. We have the technology. We have the hardware. We can kick the tires. We have it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's true.
Everyone's going to be bowing at your feet because it's the ultimate technology that any one country could possess.
Sure.
And so until I learn of or I see evidence to support something else, I will go down just confident that Roswell is the impetus behind not only the cover-up to this day, but also the level of supremacy that it has afforded and provided the United States for now 72 years.
Well, I actually witnessed UFO myself, and so that's one of the reasons that I have such an interest in the topic. And it was the flying saucer, the typical flying saucer. But the one
you never told me this, Brent.
No, I know we've never really had an opportunity to talk off the air because you're a busy guy and I don't want to bug you. But yeah, it's a true story. But now here's the interesting thing: is that it was only visible in infrared. I was using infrared binoculars looking at the night sky up in the mountains near here. And I was just panning around, playing around. I never really played with them before. I was having a ball. And I panned around and looked down the driveway of the mountain cabin that I was at, and then panned up to the treetop level and just kept going because I was mostly interested in looking at the star field because you can see all the red stars with the night vision.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
It was just brilliant, but I got
it's spectacular. It's like
is.
with infrared or with night vision. Oh. I mean, the sky is just one solid beach of stars.
Yeah, it's just spectacular. So I got about 30 feet above one of the big, I don't know what kind of trees these are out here. They're just conifer trees, but got about 30 feet above it, and there floating is the two pie plates, the proverbial flying saucer, except that had a little bit difference is that it wasn't the sharp edge where the two plates come together. There was a gap in the middle there, and there was these panels in that center section that had a light going around. Yeah. And
that has also been described. In fact, I can think of even illustrations, and I'm thinking of one specific photograph that even seems to depict, that very feature.
Yeah. And I was beside myself. I'm like, oh my God, I've been enthusiastic about this my whole life. I was keeping my mind open. I just thought there's got to be something to this. There's too many people seeing this stuff, but I've always been looking and never seen it. So I looked at it for about 15 seconds, like, my God, I got to see this with my own eyes. I lowered the binoculars and there was enough ambient light. I could see the stars. I could see the treetops, but there was no craft. There was no craft there. It didn't exist. And I'm like, my God, it was giving off.
But there it was at the infrared level.
Yeah, and giving off light. It was flashing lights on the infrared level too. So I put up the binoculars again. It's there. Bring them down.
And it was
it's not
there.
Yeah.
At what point was it gone?
Well, I decided to be gone first because I thought, it was about probably 150 to 200 yards away from me. And I thought, my God, I'm about the only thing going on in this.
God. So you're truly talking about a close encounter.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It was like
CE1.
Yeah, it was like right there. I mean, it was filling up the whole field or a large portion of the field in the binoculars. And I was like,
did you have a growing fear? Did you feel as though you were possibly being watched?
That's exactly what happened, is that I just realized I'm the only thing going on in this whole mountain valley. And I really was. There's nobody else in this whole mountain valley. It's this not desolate. There's other cabins around, but they're seasonal. And I was the only one up in this area. And I was like, I'm sitting here watching them, and they're probably sitting there watching
me.
Watching
me.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it was like, I decided to go to bed.
Well,
that was the whole experience.
The wise thing.
Yeah, I think so too. But I think
a lot of people, they go, oh, no. I would have, waved the flag, come and get me, or, we come in peace as well, that type of thing. And,
it was really crazy. But I mean, it was such a surreal experience. But
no doubt,
it's one that I'm really. Now, have you ever witnessed anything like that or anything?
We've all seen strange lights we couldn't identify. Just especially being out in the country. I know for being even out in New Mexico late at night, you feel like you could just pluck the stars right out of the sky.
Oh, sure.
Again, it's just glorious, and I hope everybody, is able to share such an experience, at least at some point in their life. But no, nothing that I could say. It was the inspiration for becoming fascinated with the topic. In my case, it was more the Kennedy assassination and all the talk at the time of the Warren report and it being labeled whitewash and cover up. And then years later, seeing that the UFO investigation, the official investigation by the Air Force, was being called the same thing, whitewash, cover-up.
Yeah.
And one book leading to another. And I was always especially interested. There was a chapter in the book, Flying Saucers, Serious Business, by the late Frank Edwards. And there was a chapter entitled, Who's Driving? And it was all these landing cases, involving occupants, involving humanoids, and typically late at night, rural, secluded, and just, individual witnesses, as you describe yourself, Brent, where you'll go, oh my God, what am I witnessing here? And I better get out of here while I still have a chance.
Yeah.
And as a young boy, it not only is like reading ghost stories, but it also it kept coming back to, what if just one of these stories is true?
Right.
And the thought that I would ignore that, I'd walk away from it and just wash my hands of, the biggest story of the millennium.
Right.
We're not alone. How does anybody just, walk away and just, you give out a loud yawn and go, well, come back and talk to me when you have physical evidence? Well, as it's been demonstrated, the Pentagon, the Air Force, and the Navy, they've been working on this again within recent years. You don't keep going back to something unless there's pay dirt, unless there's something actually there to investigate. And we have physical, electronic instrument tracking and radar tracking of these unknowns. We have landing cases involving depressions, interactions with the ground, with the vegetation, microwave effect, as far as on the roots of the plant, the life at the landing area. And then you have all the missing time experiences. And then at the very top, we have Roswell, where they have the actual crash of a craft of unknown origin.
Mm-hmm.
And here we are 72 years later, and our government is now up to 4 official explanations to the same event.
Yeah.
Which of the 4 do all the witnesses subscribe to their very deathbeds? And that's the first one.
Mm-hmm.
Capture the recovery of the actual flying saucer, the craft of unknown origin. And so what type of an investigator, what type of a researcher, what type of a human being would I be if I would go, well, it doesn't matter. You can't trust human testimony on anything.
Yeah.
Well, many a person has gone to capital punishment with nothing more than the testimony of a lone individual.
Mm-hmm.
I saw you do it. And if I can convince the jury that you did it, they will sentence you. History is, comprised of nothing more than human eyewitness testimony. And so, again, we can't say all history is acceptable except Roswell, except UFOs. It's either all or none.
All right, we're going to take our last break, ladies and gentlemen, and we'll be right back for the last half hour of the show. Don't go away. And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the last half hour of our show. It's absolutely flown by tonight, but as you can tell, that's a direct response to the phenomenal level of conversation we're having here on the show. It's it's an incredible journey, and again, our guest is Donald Raymond Schmitt, who is joining us and is one of the foremost investigators of the Roswell incident in the world, and a very prolific UFO investigator on many accounts, but has written several books about that. Now, I did want to touch a little bit tonight on the materials, the metamaterials that are claimed to have been acquired by the TTSA Academy. And first of all, I suppose one of the holy grail for you would be able to get your hands on some of that material. In order, well, I suppose specifically to Roswell. I'm not sure where all of their alleged materials are coming from. What is your take on that whole deal, anyway?
Well, we're informed that it's Bigelow Aerospace in Las Vegas, Robert Bigelow, that is housing some of this physical evidence. That it is being stored at one of his plants in Las Vegas, and that it's being tested there as well. I joke that I knew Robert Bigelow when he was just a multimillionaire. And so he's well beyond that today. And he actually had been to New Mexico on a number of occasions, and originally was very interested in the Roswell incident. I was at first concerned that they had acquired a piece, unbeknownst to us, a piece directly from Roswell, and we were not included in the loop, that they were keeping the secret from those of us who were, again, in the forefront of the investigation all these years. And I was relieved to hear that if we have physical evidence, and they're not denying that they have some physical evidence, it does not concern the 1947 incident. Okay. These are separate situations. So, okay, fine. The museum in Roswell, which I'm one of the co-founders, and I'm still an advisor to the board of directors. I'm an advisor to the director at the museum. We had offered $1 million reward about 20 years ago, and it was on the books for 5 years. If someone could provide us with a piece, with an artifact, physical evidence from a genuine UFO that would then be tested by 3 independent laboratories, and each one would verify that it was an alloy composition of something not manufactured on planet Earth. Now, one of the pieces that I know Tom DeLong had promoted and actually confirmed that they had paid $35,000 for to have tested. When we had offered $1 million from the museum about 20 years ago for that very piece, that identical piece, they would not turn it over for testing because it would have been tested independently by laboratories that they would not have selected, that they would have no control over the final disposition, the final outcome of the test results. And so to me, that threw up a red flag. Why are they now testing something that they refused to have tested when there was a much higher amount of money offered up front? But then I would suggest to your audience, whenever I'm asked, where's the wreckage? Where's the evidence today? And I would say, well, it's not with the military. They no longer have it. It's not with the government. They no longer have it. Where is it today? It's with the private corporations.
Oh.
It's with Bigelow Aerospace. We've had first-hand witnesses through the years at Rand Corporation, General Electric, Boeing, Lockheed, Hughes Aircraft, Bureau of Standards, all talking about having the wreckage in hand in an attempt to reverse engineer, break it down, test it, analyze it at the molecular level to see what makes it tick, what makes it so nearly indestructible, for example. And so it actually comes back to what then President Dwight D. Eisenhower warned us all about, the military-industrial complex. And that would be precisely what I'm pointing my finger at regarding the physical evidence recovered at Roswell. We have to always remember the government/military, they don't manufacture anything. Not a single plane, ship, tank, bullet, missile, nothing. It's all contracted out into the private sector. They have full reign over black ops, the special projects that develop and invent and come up with all of the new conceptual and innovative designs that we may first learn about 15 years after they were developed. And that's the case with the hardware recovered, not only at Roswell, but then thereafter, pertaining to the reality of the UFO phenomenon. So it's another reason that we need to be cautious, but yet we need to remain optimistic and hopeful that if disclosure is at hand, if this is about to break, we should not expect it from the government. We should not expect it from any branch of the military, including the Navy, that it could very well come from the private sector. Unless we forget what the late Ben Rich said when he made the comment. And Rich was the head of Skunk Works. I mean, the development of the Blackbird, the SR-71, and stealth technology, and Aurora, and projects that we won't even again know about for 10 years after their very deployment. When Rich made the comment that we today have the technology to fly ET home.
Yeah.
If that's true, then the best is yet to come, ladies and gentlemen. That we indeed may be on the precipice of a world that, if humans remain in control of our very destinies, that we may, have a world that is beyond our own earthly confines. And we finally, as you yourself, Brent, as far as looking through that infrared and seeing all those stars out there, that and how inviting. I mean, it's all out there, and it's like it's beckoning us to come and become part of the galactic neighborhood, so to speak.
Yeah, no, I think I agree, and I'm hopeful, very, very hopeful that we'll reach that point. I don't know. We all hear the stories of the breakaway space program, and what are your thoughts about that? Then, if we have that technology, is it already existing? Do you have an idea?
Yeah, well, you think now. You look at the situation that we haven't really been back to the moon in almost 50 years.
Right.
Or so we believe, or so we've been told.
Sure.
And the thought that the argument, the ongoing debate, and the fact that it has even intensified that whether we have even been to the moon. And just yesterday, again, I read another report that NASA released that another negative side effect, a negative feature befalling deep space, zero gravity travel, prolonged zero gravity existence, are also blood clots. Clots in the lungs, clots in even the brain. And is it setting us up for this argument? Well, we cannot send the manned mission to Mars. And before that, it was the radiation belt that prolonged exposure to that radiation is, is not conducive to a healthy, sustainable life. There are there are astronauts, for example, that to this day they aren't right. Their nervous systems, their ability to move and be mobile and walk, without aid are still somewhat hindered. So is it that we learned early on that space travel as we know it is not only impractical, but it's also dangerous, that we've decided we need to develop quicker, more efficient ways of traveling to our neighbors? Or is it that they gave up on it? And it's only in recent years, and Robert Bigelow Aerospace, who has the main contract with NASA for the manned mission to Mars, Bigelow Aerospace.
Yeah.
So that's more than coincidental that the very person who is developing the technology for the first habitants to travel and occupy the planet Mars also is controlling the UFO hardware, the UFO technology.
Yeah. That's a
coincidence?
Probably not.
I would probably beg to differ.
So what is your feeling about them, the Stars Academy, entering into a research agreement with the military for these metamaterials that they have? To me, it just felt like a big red flag. Like, what the hell are they doing?
Of course. Especially when the likes of Tom DeLonge, who I keep checking. Has he ever been to New Mexico? No. Has he ever been to the museum in New Mexico? No. Has he ever talked to a single witness involved? No. Has he ever talked to any of the actual research involved? No. But yet he makes the proclamation that Roswell was nothing more than a recovered Nazi bell, a German bell from World War II. Well, I'd love to see your sources. Yeah. Who are your witnesses? Yeah. Why are you the authority on this now?
Yeah.
And why are you the spokesperson, again, pushing me aside, and you're now the official, spokesperson on Roswell? I beg to differ.
Yeah.
Because we could help you, Tom, but you never came to us. If you're looking for answers, we certainly could place you in the right direction of people you need to go to, sources you need to go to. We need to, file Freedom of Information Act requests specifically spearheading individuals who, through the years we've learned through their family members, had access. We're at Wright-Patterson. We're at Roswell. We're at the Pentagon at the time, and may have indeed had direct access to the physical remains. So I find in many ways they're just flailing in the dark. You're just seeing what's going to stick on the wall. Mm-hmm. And that's, therein for me, would be the red flags. The idea that these people, in many ways, they demonstrate that they want complete control. They want to be the king makers. And as a result, they do not acknowledge all those who have done all the spade work, who have laid, all the groundwork leading to where they presently are. Mm-hmm. And I find that most unfortunate, and it has nothing to do with jealousy or bitterness, as much as it's no different than when we had Roswell witnesses, principal high-ranking officers, and we went to the Clinton administration. And this was after Bill Clinton had expressed interest and curiosity in UFOs / Roswell. And we went directly to the White House and said, well, what if we give you a witness? What if we give you 10 witnesses? Mm-hmm. See if we can get and deaf ears. And there was a disconnect. I was always wondering, we're offering to provide you with the real thing, genuine article. And then when it came down to where the rubber is meeting the road, they weren't willing to take that step. And I find that to actually be the case also with, the same situation today, that they're going to the wrong people. They're talking to the wrong sources, or at least they're not asking our advice as to who would we advise? Where should they still, mount an effort, put pressure on, and hope that there's additional evidence, additional hardware, and this team effort. Much of ufology for many years has not been a team effort.
No.
It's so many people jockeying for a little piece of a little pie.
Mm-hmm.
And yet I still maintain to this day, Brent, that if any one of us win, we all win.
Right.
We all win.
Mm-hmm.
I will not for a moment go, well, it should have been me. Yeah. Or I wish I was there. No, you have just validated, you have just substantiated everything that I have worked so hard to uncover, unravel for all these years. And you got to the finish line before me, and I will applaud you and say, mission accomplished. And if I helped in any way, thank you.
Yeah. Well, it's got to be a frustrating journey, I'm sure, but I can tell you that I agree, and I think what you're talking about in the UFO community is echoed all over. It's in the Bigfoot community, it's in the paranormal communities. They all have their I don't know if you call them sects, so SECTS or what,
Mm-hmm.
but there's like these factions of people that seem to be competing, and that's really unfortunate because. Well, you got to wonder in some of those cases if it's not on purpose, just to obfuscate the truth. That there are.
You do. You have to wonder often if we're dealing with useful idiots. Who are they taking their marching orders from? What are is it a personal agenda, or is it a much greater scheme of things? I find, for example, many of the people right now who are so anti-disclosure, who believe that this is just all such nonsense today. They're the very same people who have been attacking Roswell in our efforts for years. Mm-hmm. Very same people. And so therein, I conclude that that their agenda is twofold. That it's to obfuscate, it's to stall for time, make sure that either they establish a greater groundhold of what's going on, that they then can take credit, take control, and receive all the accolades. They're not about to relinquish any of the praise that they feel should be all directed in their direction, mm-hmm. or they're working for the dark side.
Yeah.
They're presenting, a pro-UFO front to infiltrate, when in reality, they're the contemporary moles who are working both sides. They're the double agents, so to speak.
Sure. Yeah, I think so. I want to make sure on the show tonight to give you some time to talk about your new book that's just come out, and to let people know about it and where they can get it.
Okay. Inside the Real Area 51, or UFO Secrets. This is the revised edition of Inside the Real Area 51. It's called UFO Secrets Inside Wright-Patterson. And before there was Area 51, long before there was Area 51, there was Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. It was the most secret military facility in the world, bar none. Post-World War II, 1947, it was the headquarters of the Foreign Technology Division. And all the captured armory aircraft from World War II, it would go to Wright-Pat for testing and analysis. If we so much as recovered a Russian MiG, it would go to Wright-Pat for testing and breakdown. So historically, it's a proven fact that the materials recovered at Roswell went to Wright-Pat for testing and analysis. It's not debatable. It's a proven historic reality that that's where the materials went. And the people who were there on the receiving end, whether the wreckage whether the remains of the craft, or even more amazingly, the remains of the crew, the bodies, including the survivor, all went to Wright-Patterson. So we have all the witnesses there on the receiving end. And those are the ones that we've interviewed, those are the ones we tracked down, and all of their fascinating, amazing accounts of what they witnessed, of what they observed, what they held in their hands, up to the very doctors who were involved in autopsies at the base at that time, all from Roswell. So in other words, this is Roswell part 2.
Okay.
The incident, the crash, the recovery operation at Roswell. And then after everything was shipped out, where did it go? Wright-Patterson. And what became of it? Wright-Patterson. What was done with it? Wright-Patterson. And that is the central focus, the theme of the current book, UFO Secrets at Wright-Patterson, which is available at all fine bookstores, most notably Barnes & Noble, and certainly Amazon.com.
Excellent. Now, we got about 4 minutes left. We do have a call here, so this is area code 228. You're on the air.
Hello, it's very nice to meet you, Donald. Hello, Brent.
Thank you.
I have a question, Donald, and it is more or less a theory. It's my opinion. Look, in the 60s, paranormal psychology and mind over matter and mental telepathy and teleportation and teleportranslation and, telekinesis, it was being largely studied and explored, but it was taboo in the public. And so let's fast forward, from the 60s to now, and all the politics aside from it, nowadays we've got so many sightings of UFOs and paranormal events. And people, the voice-to-skull technology and the wireless technology centering in on people's pineal glands. And, yes, the hypnosis that's involved. You can't get people to understand that our technology is that advanced. It was passed down from it was brought forward. And we just know an inkling of what is an actual reality of what is going on. And, all politics aside, I understand, yes, the most of the world leaders are nothing more than puppets, and they dance to the tune of those who hold the purse strings. There's a lot of marionettes, and yes, it's the larger, bigger corporations that had, plotted this all out. And I want to joggle your mind about the ley lines of the earth and the vortexes. And because, there are experiences of people actually driving down highways. Myself, for one, being in the middle of an interstate, no exits anywhere around, and then all of a sudden there's 25, 30 cars around you, all of a sudden, that just landed. And yes, people are being teleportated. I myself was teleportated over 200 miles from one state to another without any mileage off of my vehicle. It landed on a highway in a different direction and within the blink of an eye one day. And yes, I pulled over to the nearest gas station. I knew that I had been transported. Okay? I couldn't say who did it. All right, but this is happening to a lot of people. It is, and it is good that you're bringing it out in the open. And yes, we all want disclosure. But yes, the government is desensitizing us. They started it with the Jetsons cartoon.
You mentioned that much of this originated.
Excuse me. Yes, please speak.
That much of this originated in the 1960s. What if I could tell you that it originated back in the 1940s? In fact, there's a lot of documentation.
Yes, sir, I did that research. My father was in Korea, and he always told me never to let anyone brainwash me, and you can do anything you put your mind to if you really want to do it. He was very adept. He was an Army and in the Air Force and the Army, telecommunications specialist. He knew a great deal about electromagnetics.
Sure. We got to hurry
along. He really
along.
knew about some of these things.
We're almost just out of time.
Yes, sir. I'm well aware through personal experience.
Cool. Thank you so much for your call.
You touch on many things that are closely linked to not only UFOs, but maybe some of the spin-off in research and development, especially with AI, artificial intelligence. And to me, that's what's becoming more and more disconcerting, more frightening, the idea that at some point human beings will become more and more irrelevant, and that we'll all have microchips, within our bodies, and we'll be watched and monitored, our every move, where we are and what we're thinking. And I think that's where, if our visitors from off the planet, if there's anything they could demonstrate, is that we're unique, that there's no this species on planet Earth, maybe beyond us just being the galactic zoo, so to speak, that as long as we still control our own destinies, as long as we still remain almost like infants within, the universe, and that we have this craving for more knowledge, more information, and as yet we control the information, we control the data, that there would be hope for us, and that the hope still lies within each one of us individually. And I hope that still remains the case.
Absolutely. And thank you,
Well, I'm in wholehearted agreement with you.
Yeah, I had to mute you there because I had to jump us off the network quick, but we're currently in overtime. And Donald, I don't know how much time you have to continue, but I just wanted to make sure you could finish that thought for our YouTube stream.
Thank you. And I think with that, we'll have to leave the next for chapter 3 sometime early next year.
Very good. Thank you, Five Hazel, for the call. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good night.
Thank you for calling.
And Donald, I can't thank you enough for coming back again. I'm absolutely thrilled that you made another visit here, and I anxiously look forward to getting your time again if you would bless us with another presence.
Of course, and I promise you next time, I'm sure you had a long list of questions that you had prepared, and the next time we will I'll provide you with ample time to ask whatever you would like.
Oh, I love the journey we had tonight. I wouldn't change a thing. It was absolutely brilliant. And thank you for your time, and thank you to all of you out there for watching and being a part of the shows. Make sure to tune in next time. We'll always be here every night of the week, 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. We are doing a portal. So good night, everybody.